You're listening to Power Talk, Berkeley Electric Cooperative's official broadcast about the cooperative, our communities, and ways to use energy wisely. And now, let's join our hosts for today's episode. Good morning and welcome to Power Talk. I'm Micah Ponce, the Communications and Media Specialist here at Berkeley Electric Cooperative, joined by my faithful co-host, Ms. Libby Roig, the Director of Marketing and Communications.
Good morning, Micah.
Good morning. And for those of you who just might be watching us, our guest probably doesn't need much of an introduction.
No, this is probably our highest profile guest.
I'm just the old guy. That's all.
Might recognize the voice.
I was about to say the voice is recognizable too. Mr. Rob Fowler, the Chief Meteorologist for Storm Team 2. Welcome, sir.
Well, it's nice to be here. Thank you guys for the invite. And you have a beautiful studio, as folks can see. And just love stopping by and talking about whatever you guys want to talk about.
Our kind of guest.
Exactly. You know, we're thrilled to have you in the studio and probably turning the tables on you a little bit. You're the one who's usually leading the dance here and asking the questions, but we're going to talk to you today.
Okay.
Interview you, so shake things up a little bit. So we're trying to get our viewers and listeners in the holiday spirit by talking about Toys for Tots and how people can get involved to make the holidays a little brighter for children in the Lowcountry. And we are, Berkeley Electric, of course, is a proud sponsor of Toys for Tots, but you know, you've lived here in the Lowcountry for more than a minute, and folks know you, know who you are, and you've been at Storm Team 2 for how long now?
Well, I just celebrated in September my 36th anniversary. So I got here in 1987, September of 87, and came with a 4-year contract thinking I will work 4 years and then move on. That's what we kind of do. We work our way up the ladder, and then I got here to Charleston, and I said, why would I want to leave this paradise?
Yeah.
And, of course, Hugo happened in the middle of that. And that kind of changed everything for me, Micah and Libby, because I got involved, obviously, before Hugo. But then when Hugo happened, there was this tide, this pull that you just couldn't leave. You felt really connected to this community, and I wanted to see this thing through. So Channel 2 came to me after Hugo and said, hey, we'd like to extend your contract. Would you like to stay a little bit longer? And I said, absolutely. And, 5 years became 10, 15, 20, 25, and now just celebrated 36.
Well, congratulations.
Thanks. It was the best decision I ever made.
I'm not quite there yet. I've got 23 under my belt, so I'm not too far behind you.
Well, a lot of people ask me, okay, now you've done 36, when are you going to retire? And I said, when a second grader comes up to me and says, my grandfather said you came to his class to talk about weather, so that might be the time to kind of punch the ticket.
Yeah, I've been here long enough now that one of the newest people we hired is young enough to be my daughter. So
yes.
I know that's Father Time telling me that it's getting close.
Well, keep on trucking, if you still love what you do. And that's certainly how I feel about what I do. And I do it in a great community, too. I love this place.
Well, I know we said Toys for Tots, but, we're an electric utility, so, of course, weather is very important to us.
Absolutely.
They're often linked, and it's, if there's a major event such as a hurricane, or an ice storm, and thankfully we've had a reasonably quiet 2023 season. Knock on wood.
It's almost over. Almost over officially. The numbers have been above normal. It's one of our busiest years ever. Mm-hmm. But when you look at the tracks of the storms, that's where it makes the difference. The one thing we can do is we can predict, or feel like we can predict, how many storms we may have. What we really don't do a good job predicting is where they're going to land.
Right. And
we've been very lucky this year that most of them have stayed out in the ocean and turned. So you can have 30 storms. If they all do that, you're okay. But I'm always reminded, 1992, Hurricane Andrew, as you know, hit South Florida as a Category 5 hurricane. There were only 7 storms that year. That's way below average. Yeah. But one of them was one of the only 4 Category 5 hurricanes to hit our coast. So that one goes down as a busy year, even though the numbers were not reflective of that.
And it just takes one bad storm.
That's exactly it, Libby. We found out Hugo, and I know we talk a lot about Hugo,
right, yep.
But Hugo was the last major hurricane to make landfall. There have been other hurricanes that people have experienced here, but that has to be the benchmark. That has to be the one you look at and say, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when it's going to happen again. It won't be called Hugo. That name has been retired, but there will be another storm like a Hugo that will completely, devastate this area. We hope it will never happen, but we know there's always that chance.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, like you said, it's such a high watermark for the Lowcountry and here, especially at Berkeley Electric, because essentially we had 0 meters turning by the time that it was over with. So we had weeks upon weeks upon weeks of recovery, and I was unfortunate enough to be down in Alabama after Hurricane Katrina came through,
right,
and just seeing the type of devastation that they can do and the life-changing event that they can make. Yeah, I mean, you're going to talk about it 30 years later, 40 years later, because it leaves that much of a mark on the communities.
When you just said life-changing, I literally got goosebumps because it was life-changing. There were so many people displaced. There were so many people that their attitude towards hurricanes changed.
You're listening to Power
It just
Talk.
changed everything because you saw up close and personal. You know what it was coming, Micah?
Our communities.
I'm looking, going, this isn't happening. This isn't happening. I'm watching the satellite.
Let's join our hosts.
The technology we had back then was very, very primitive. We used a radar, the WSR Weather Service radar 57, as in 1957.
Oh, my.
And so it was old technology, but you're still thinking this is not going to happen. And it did. And all of a sudden, your life changed because of that. And now you look at these storms totally differently than you may have before when you may not have been impacted.
And what is that like as a young meteorologist, experiencing that? I mean, certainly there was the disbelief of watching it, but, what's that like?
I was 29 years old. It was my first job as a chief. I'd been here in Charleston 2 years. Between 87 and 89, we had a couple of tropical systems that impacted us, but nothing really significant. And yeah, you're almost like this isn't happening. This storm is not going to come here. And even as late as 9 o'clock that Thursday night, the night of the 21st, I spent the night at the National Weather Service office at the airport, and we had about 13 meteorologists with me at the National Weather Service. And even as late as 9 o'clock, the models were still telling us it was going to turn more towards Myrtle Beach, and we would be on the weaker side of the storm. And I'll never forget the meteorologist in charge. His name was Dick Chanot, and we were broadcasting live during the storm from the Weather Service. And he said, Rob, I need to come on your television station and tell people, if they're still watching, that this is not turning. It's coming right up Charleston Harbor. So when he said that, it really kind of hit home that in 3 hours, the eye of the storm was going to be right on top of us. But, of course, the eye was the center of the storm. We had already been impacted, and we knew that the backside of the storm, where I was worse, was still going to be impacting us as well. So, it was. It's a great question, Libby, because I go back and think about what I was thinking, and I don't even remember. It was almost like you were in some kind of a daze.
Yeah.
And then when you walked out the next day and you saw your beloved city, your paradise, just trees down everywhere.
Right, yeah.
It was, and big old, interstate signs, those big green ones that looked like someone folded a piece of bread in half. The power of that, and then that's where you guys came in. I can't say enough great things about what you guys do, not just before the storm and during the storm, but after the storm, to get people up and running so quickly. And I've seen ice storms, and I've seen hurricanes, and I've seen tornadoes, and just even bad, severe thunderstorms that you guys have been out in weather that we tell people not to go out in.
Right, yeah.
And you guys are out there trying to keep people up and running. And that's I can't say enough nice things. When people come up to me and they're like, oh, my power's out, I'm like, I've literally seen you guys in the middle of a median on an interstate. It's icy, it's marshy, it's whatever, trying to get those power lines back up and running. And it's amazing.
Yeah, we really tip our hat to our line workers and our right-of-way guys. They, like you said, when nobody else is supposed to be out, they're out doing what they can to help the situation.
So well done.
Well, and we really pride ourselves in when things are at their worst, being at our best, and a lot of that is planning. But Hugo was a big turning point for even the co-op. It showed us how little we knew and how much we did need to change our plan, and we've built on that with every experience since then. But there's just only so much you can do to prepare for something that changes the landscape like Hugo did. I mean, the Lowcountry was not the same after the storm.
It really wasn't. I still drive up 17 North heading towards Georgetown, and you look to the left and you look to the right in the forest, and you still see trees that are bent at a certain angle, 45 degrees or whatever, and that was all Hugo. That was Hugo. A lot of the trees obviously have grown back up, and some replanting has taken place, but the marks are still there, no doubt about it. And it was a life-changing experience, and we have these young journalists that come in, and when there's tropical weather, like, hey, Rob, is this going to hit us? And they're almost kind of hinting towards an excitement, because it looks good on a resume tape, maybe for their next job. And I'm like, guys, you don't want this. No. You do not want this. It may sound exciting and it may look good on a resume tape. You're kind of blowing in the wind and things like that. But believe me, after you've lived it, that's the last thing you want. And keep in mind now, and you guys know this as much as I do, that the population here has exploded. In 34 years post-Hugo, I know Mount Pleasant was 15,000 people when we moved here. Now it's over 100,000. So there's a lot more people in harm's way, and there's a lot more people that will be impacted by the next storm, whenever that may be.
Yeah.
No, definitely, because like you said, back during those times, I think we were maybe around the 50 or 60,000 meter mark, and we're well over 110,000 meters now. So, I mean, in that amount of time, we've added a lot of folks all throughout the Lowcountry. And, you've mentioned the ice storms, and, we haven't had another Hugo, thank goodness. But I remember I was here for Winter Storm Pax.
Yes.
And that made a very large impact up our way. Maybe not so much down along the coast, but, we're heavily forested back up this way. And the frost line, we were right at the frost line. And, it's just amazing the amount of damage that ice can do as well. And I think one of the things that I learned about it was because the power goes out when, the ice comes and the tree limbs fall, but then the power goes back out again when the ice starts to melt and all the trees stand back up. So, it was just a frustrating process because you've gone and you've gotten the power back on, and put everything back, and then all of a sudden the trees come back up after the ice melts, and boom, there goes power out again. And so, it's just frustrating for everybody. But being out there in the forest and hearing those trees snapping,
absolutely,
and watching them fall as the linemen are up on the pole and there's treetops breaking all around them. You got to give it up to those guys for working in those conditions.
I'll tell you, we, of course, we remember, when the ice was on the Ravenel Bridge and then melted and broke and fell on the bridge. But we're right at the foot of the bridge, and we have a tower at Channel 2 that's 719 feet tall. And you get chunks of ice forming on that tower, and when they melt, those chunks come down. It sounds like elephants on our roof. So you can only imagine the stress put on trees and even buildings because of that. So ice storms that's nasty, no doubt about it.
Living in the Lowcountry, we don't have to deal with it that often, thank goodness.
Thank goodness, yes.
But living in the Lowcountry, we don't deal with it that often, and so when it comes,
it sticks out in your mind.
It sticks out in your mind, because folks around here, we struggle to drive sometimes when it's raining, let alone when there's ice.
And then
out
you
there.
throw ice or snow on top of ice, then it's a whole different ball game, that's for sure.
Oh, boy. Well, hopefully we can avoid that this winter.
That's right. Yep. We're looking good so far.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, knock on wood. But, Berkeley Electric, we talked about, preparing for the storms and everything else like that. And, we've dodged a lot of bullets in the year. We invest heavily in preventive maintenance and right-of-way and that type of stuff. But, our crews are always out there. One of the things, we talk about like mutual aid and helping, and you were talking about the way that our crews are out in the field helping everybody else. And that's part of the cooperative way is that we have mutual aid agreements. And so we actually, when we don't have snow down here, there's definitely snow up in the up country and the upstate. And so almost every winter we're taking the road trip up to Blue Ridge or somewhere in the upstate and helping them with the folks who are a lot more familiar with the snow and the mountainous terrain. So it's definitely something that you have to take into account.
Yeah, and I think you guys do such a great job. I think that gives me so much pride when I see you guys going to help other people, because we know when Hugo happened, we had people coming in from everywhere.
Yeah.
And when you're driving up and down an interstate and there's been a tropical storm or hurricane somewhere, and you see just your electric trucks driving down the road going towards that area that was impacted, it gives you a lot of pride, because that we got a lot of help after Hurricane Hugo and subsequent storms too. So for us to reciprocate and be there when someone else needs us, I know the helpless feeling that you have when the power is out. And it's interesting because a lot of people will ask me, Rob, do you think I need to evacuate for this storm? And it might be marginal, if you will.
Right.
But I always tell people, I said, listen, I can give you the facts. I can give the information. We try to kind of lay all the cards on the table. But that's a personal decision about evacuation. But you have to be ready to be without power for a while, potentially. Are you ready for that? are you ready to hear trees breaking in your backyard, not knowing if the next tree that breaks is coming into your house?
Right.
So there's some anxiety and some trepidation there. So if you have some uncomfortability, then that might be a time to evacuate. If you're okay with that, then I think this storm is not going to be that bad of a storm. But there could be small impacts that will impact some folks and not others. So got to be ready.
Yeah, we've run into those situations too, where folks have mandatory evacuations along the coast and who choose to stay. And I mean, it's a personal choice. But a lot of times though, you're gonna see those impacts a lot longer, and making that choice to stay, like you said, you have to be prepared for that, because we have folks, we along the coast where we've had to power come into the substation, or the storm surge, come into the substations, and we're having to cut the power to preserve the equipment. And a lot of those folks who are still staying there, it's like, well, we need power, and it's like, well, unfortunately,
right,
this is a storm, and there's not a lot we can do to control that. But we definitely salute the linemen who are out there every day working hard for everybody. And Libby mentioned the fact that we have Hurricane Hugo, and it was a high watermark for us, and she mentioned our major storm plan. I just actually recently learned that before Hugo, we didn't have a major storm plan, and that served as the blueprint to develop one for all of the storms going forward. And even when Idalia came through a little while ago, that major storm plan was put in implementation, if I'm talking a little too quickly. But we had crews staged from all the cooperatives in neighboring states, poised, ready to come down and help out, because, like you said, we've gone to them and helped them out, and that's that mutual aid, and everybody
absolutely
is looking out for their fellow man when it comes to that type of thing.
Yeah, having a plan is so very important, even on the personal level. The family plan, know where you're going to go if you have to leave, and know where your family members are going so you can stay in communication. I'll tell you, we had a chief engineer. His name is Mike Opowski, and he came from Harlingen, Brownsville, McAllen, Texas, after Hurricane Gilbert in 1988. So he became our chief engineer early in 1989. Now, keep in mind we had no idea that 9 months later we would have Hurricane Hugo on our doorstep. But he came to me and said, Rob, do you have a plan, a hurricane plan? I just went through Gilbert last year with my TV station, and we had to put together a plan. I said, Mike, I don't know, So we did some digging. And sure enough, we found a plan, but most of the people who are involved in that plan weren't there anymore. So we had to redo the whole thing. But I give him a lot of credit about getting us prepared. And again, not knowing at that time that this would be our year. But because of him, we did have a plan in place. We had different locations we could broadcast from. And it turned out to be the plan that probably helped put us into a position to keep people informed, even through the whole storm into the next morning.
That's great.
Well, for those of you who might just be tuning in, we are sitting down with Mr. Rob Fowler, Storm Team 2 meteorologist. Thank you very much for joining us, sir.
My pleasure.
And we've been talking storms, but I think we're going to talk about switch gears to a little bit happier subject.
Let's do it.
We're moving into November, and like we said, we're sort of leaving the storm season behind us, and most of the hurricane threat's gone away. But that means that the holidays are coming our way.
My favorite time of the year.
That's what we want to see coming our way, is Christmas and Thanksgiving and all those fun things. It's also a favorite time of year for us. So, and we're really getting around the spirit around here. Libby's got her sweater on. We've got our decorations on the table. I even found red somewhere to put on as well.
I'm repping the Braves. So, I'm still in denial that they didn't make it to the World Series. But
tough season.
I grew up in Atlanta, so I'm a big Braves fan.
Well, we do what we can to, try to make the spirits bright for our members. And one of the things that we're doing is by supporting Toys for Tots. And it's just one of the ways we work for the community. And last year, I believe the Marines distributed more than 100,000 toys.
It was over 100,000, about 108,000 toys, and because of you guys and your members, and we couldn't do it without you guys. And the Toys for Tots program, Micah and Libby, has been going on a long time. 1947 started in California, and kind of an interesting beginning because there was a Major Bill Hendricks in California, and he just felt like something was missing. So his wife made dolls to try to distribute to some of the kids in that area for Christmas. And what they found out, there was really no organization who could take control of this and distribute these toys. So being a good husband and a good Marine, he said, we can do this, honey. And they started the program.
Wow.
And it was adopted by the Marine Corps Foundation, the reserve unit mainly. And it's been going strong since 1947. Now, how we joined Channel 2, when I got here in 87, our boss, our general manager at the time, Bill Evans, said, listen, I want to get you involved in the community. What do you like? I said, I love Christmas. I just came from Atlanta, and they do Toys for Tots really big. The TV station kind of puts its arms around it. And so he said, sounds great. Set up a meeting with the Marines, and let's see what they think. And the initial meeting, we sat around a table with the Marines, and they're like, Rob, we really can't do this. We're a government agency. We can't really partner with one TV station. We have to spread the wealth. And we understood that, but we kind of said, well, what kind of promotion are you getting from the TV stations now? And they said, well, we send out a press release. This goes way back, days of press releases that you might have gotten through the mail and not even via fax,
right.
And certainly no email. But and we would say, hey, we might come cover it. We're not sure if something happens.
Yeah.
An accident or something like that.
Yeah,
that
we'll get pulled away.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So we promise them, we understand that, but we promise if you partner with us exclusively, we'll wrap our arms around this and we'll make it our own. And I'm happy to say that this will be my 37th year with the Marines here locally doing Toys for Tots. And I don't know the exact numbers, but we're probably close to 2 million toys collected and distributed in this area. And you'd like to say, do you really need that many toys to distribute? And unfortunately, the need is there.
Yeah.
And we have a feeling that the need will continue to grow. And that's why, the supply has to meet the demand. And we couldn't do it without you guys. I mean, the Marines run the program. We just promote the program at Channel 2. They do an amazing job. And it's fun. It's absolutely, I look forward to it every single year. There's nothing like seeing a child, their eyes light up on Christmas morning when there's toys under the tree. And I'm always reminded that, what's the first question that people ask you after Christmas when you get back to school?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What'd you get for Christmas? And it's not fair for a child to potentially have to lie and say they got something and they didn't, or say they got nothing. That may be even worse.
Yeah.
So we try to make sure that gap is closed. And again, your members have always come through. I come out here and broadcast live and look forward to it. And the boxes just fill up, and it's magical.
And we're so happy to do our part. Berkeley Electric serves portions of the Tri-County, so I feel like we provide an opportunity for people to get back, because we touch some of the more rural areas, up in Ondaw, Johns Island, Goose Creek, and Monk's Corner, of course, but it just opens up all those more locations for people to drop off. And, as a utility, we serve everybody.
Right.
It doesn't matter who you are or how much is in your bank account. We still provide electricity to everybody. And we see the need day in and day out where people are struggling to pay their electric bill, certainly, but choosing between food and prescriptions sometimes. And that trickles down to the kiddos, and there's a lot of need out there, and so we're so grateful for the members who can give and do give generously.
Well, we appreciate it, no doubt about it. And every toy makes a difference. I always say that every toy makes a difference. And this year they changed a few things. The age limit have gone up to 16 now.
Okay.
At one time it was that age limit, then they backed it off to 12, and I say the Marine Corps Foundation, and then they've decided to go back up to 16. And so there are family units, as you guys know, where you might have a 5-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
They're part of that family unit, so you don't want to leave anybody out if possible. So for your listeners here and your viewers here and your members, if there's a way maybe you can think about that older age group, that always helps out too. Yeah. Now, of course, it's probably electronics and it's those kinds of cool things, but like I said, every toy, everything makes a difference.
Yeah.
And try to make it more convenient. Each one of our district offices is a drop-off location, and like you mentioned, we see the toys stacking up in there already. So I mean, we got the boxes out there. So anybody who wants to come by and add to the pile, you're more than welcome.
Yeah. And I know in my family, I try to engage my son. My husband and I are fortunate to be able to provide for him, but I want him to understand how lucky he is and how not everybody has that. So, take your kids out. If you've got grandkids or kids, take them out shopping, let them pick out some toys, and then bring them by the office and drop them off.
I think that's the most just fascinating thing that I just love is seeing kids helping kids.
Mm-hmm.
And we go to a lot of locations as we'll continue through, almost to Christmas. And just to see children bringing in toys for other kids that they don't even know.
Yeah.
Or sometimes we'll get a young child who comes in with mom and dad, and they'll say, Mr. Fowler, she had a birthday party, and instead of keeping the toys, she wants to donate all her birthday presents to somebody else. And you can't help but maybe shed a little tear or get a little goosebump or have a good feeling just because of that. Because what a great lesson. As this is better to give than to receive, and the giving in this community, and you guys know this, all you have to do is ask.
Yeah.
That's all you do is ask, and people always respond.
Yeah.
Well, I mentioned that we are a drop-off location, but there's dozens of other drop-off locations across the county, Tri-County, including North Charleston City Hall, Channel 2 News, of course.
We are in Mount Pleasant.
And Mount Pleasant. What's the application period, and how do people apply to be a part of it if they need to apply for the
Great question, because we know there's a need, as Libby mentioned. So the application process continues through December 2nd, so we've got a few more days from this broadcast. In person at 5101 Ashley Phosphate Road. That's on the corner of Ashley Phosphate and Dorchester Road. That's our toy factory again this year. I'm old school. This is the Festival Center, and my late mother-in-law, when she would visit from Green Bay, Wisconsin, we spent a lot of time at that shopping center because it had a Hamricks there.
Okay.
So if you've been around for a while and you know what Hamricks
is. Yeah, actually I do, yeah.
Well, that was my mother-in-law would spend 3 hours in that Hamricks. So my father-in-law and I usually went across the street to Frankie's Fun Park while my wife and her mom were shopping. But all kidding aside, that's where they're located. So if you're familiar with that landmark, and they're kind of around the back, so you can apply in person. Online registration this time for the first time, and that's gone tremendously well. But the Marines were kind of weighing that just to make sure that they don't get too overwhelmed, because obviously it does make it easier when you can register online. But you don't have to bring too much, just birth certificates for the kids, and they don't really ask too many questions. If you say that you need some help, there's help out there, and they're going to make sure you get the help you need.
So if you can help, dropping off the toys is obviously a great way. But do the Marines take volunteers to help sort toys?
They do. They as it gets closer to Christmas, and here we're kind of winding a month away roughly now. So that is one of the coolest things, is to go to the toy factory, and you can spend a couple of hours there and helping sort. Because when you get a registration, when someone registers, then basically they list the ages of the kids, the gender of the children, and then you go shopping in the back where all the toys are that have been donated. When you're older, I have grandkids now, so I'm getting back into some of those toys. But when you're older, you're like, is this good for a 9-year-old? You're not quite sure. You don't want to insult anybody and say it's. So having the kids, like if you bring your kids there, the kids are like, oh no, this is perfect. I would love this, and I'm 9. So, but yes, absolutely, volunteers are definitely wanted and needed. And the Marines appreciate the help. They're a small unit here in Charleston, so they do a yeoman's job. But every now and then, you need a little help.
Well, over the years, have there been any real special moments that come to mind from partnering with Toys for Tots?
Oh gosh, you're gonna make me cry, Micah. So let me just tell you one that was a great example. So what happened over the years is the registration process would go on for a certain amount of time. Sometimes not as long as it probably could have. So we had to cut off registration. So then you ultimately have a lot of folks who say, Mr. Fowler, I didn't know, I didn't meet the deadline, but I still need help. So we partnered with North Charleston Police and some of the law enforcement agencies in this region. And the Marines said, listen, if there are any toys left over after we fill all our registrations, we will donate those toys to you guys if you have some other needs. So school resource officers have helped us out. Obviously, unfortunately, there are some stories that we don't know about. There may have been a crime involved, and maybe the father was pulled out of the home, and the police know about this, but the general public doesn't know. But they know there's a need in that house. Yeah. So it really got to be pretty cool that we would have these extra families that we could surprise And the best way to do it would be to surprise them on Christmas morning. So that's what we do now. We've been going out on Christmas morning with this supplemental list of families that have been, thrown our way by different sources. But anyway, so there was one time that we were driving up Dorchester Road, Ashboro neighborhood, and we had a young boy, let's just say his name's Johnny, and Johnny was in this house, and we had some new volunteers with us who had never been out on Christmas morning, because basically when you get out on Christmas morning, it's a no-judgment zone. You don't know what people are going through. Because you do ride up into a house, and there might be a big Escalade in the front, and you're like, wait a second, do they really need help? But when you get inside, you realize there's definitely help. So we get to this beautiful home, brick home in Ashboro, and some of the new volunteers, I could see in their eyes, they're like, is this really the right address, So I go up and I knock on the door, and an older lady answers, and I said, Mrs. Smith, we're here to help Johnny. We understand there's a need. And she says, who told you? And I said, I don't know the circumstances. We were just told to come to this home. And here's the backstory. So this lady was the grandmother. Johnny is her grandson. Her son and daughter-in-law and Johnny, their home had recently burned down to the ground.
Oh, goodness.
They had nowhere to go. They lost all their Christmas presents, lost everything. So they were living with Grandma for a period of time, and someone heard about this, contacted Toys for Tots. So now everybody's starting to kind of get the feel, But here's the kicker. So Johnny, in the fire, lost his favorite toy. His favorite toy was a white Power Ranger.
Okay.
In the bag of toys, not knowing this, to give to Johnny was a white Power Ranger.
That's amazing. Yeah.
I mean, and now everybody's crying because, you don't judge a book by its cover. We did not know. The house looked fine. The neighborhood was what you wouldn't think of as a neighborhood needing help. And it turns out that was probably one of my favorite Toys for Tots drops of all time, just because of that situation. And again, it was those are the kinds of things that when I think about someone donating one toy, whoever donated that white Power Ranger, they don't realize
the impact that
they made.
Yeah.
Not just on Johnny and his family, but the group that was giving Johnny that toy.
Yeah, you definitely receive more when you give than you ever could give.
Yeah, and I keep doing it year after year. And I love having families come back, and I love have kids come back because the kids love it just as much. When we go out on Christmas morning, most of the toys are given out well before Christmas by the Marines, but this is that supplemental list. But we always make sure that when we get to a house, we open the bag of toys and we hand the toys to the kids, and they're the ones who physically go up to the front door. And we always have an escort. We have police and fire with us. So, and then they're the ones who actually physically get to hand that toy over to a fellow child.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's truly amazing. The work that y'all do with Toys for Tots, and to learn how you can volunteer or donate to Toys for Tots, you can go to their website.
Yes, count-on2.com or the Charleston toysfortots.org, and we've got a good page on our website too, if that's easier to go there.
Yeah.
And again, the deadline for families to apply to receive a toy is fast approaching. It's going to be open through December 9th this year. But I think that's us. We're out of time.
That was the fastest 30 minutes.
It was.
Wow.
It was crazy.
Can't extend it to an hour. I've got more stories I could tell.
Well, thank you all for tuning in to Power Talk. This is the official broadcast of your electric cooperative, and you can catch up with past episodes on streaming platforms like Spotify, Apple, and iHeartRadio. And you can get a behind-the-scenes look on Berkeley Electric's YouTube channel. But until next time, this is Power Talk, signing off.